Hello and welcome to Youngfolk Knits. My name is Casey and this is a special episode. Hello y'all and welcome to today's special episode of Youngfolk Knits podcast. It's all about the Bees Are Friends knit along. My name is Casey and you can find me on Instagram at youngfolk.knits and on Ravelry at Casey Apple. The knit along is being co-hosted by Becky and you can find her on Instagram at a.handknit.letter. So let's jump right into the Humlebi shawl. So this is the pattern that we have chosen. It's all about bees and it's designed by Laurie of Fiber Tales. We think this shawl is great because we love bees, we love knitting. It's just perfect. So I'm a beekeeper in Arkansas and Becky also loves bees. She helps me with the beehives sometimes and she loves to find them in her garden pollinating all of her beautiful plants. So we have a special place in our heart for bees. Let me read you what Laurie says is the inspiration behind the Humlebi shawl. Humlebi means bumblebee in Danish, and the shawl was inspired by the bees waking up after a long winter to seek the first flowers of spring. I think this is perfect because in winter weather, the bees will in a sense, hibernate. They will bundle up, huddle up together, try to stay warm. There's no activity. They're not leaving the hive. And then when spring and warmer weather comes, the bees awaken. They start actively leaving the hive to collect pollen, to start making honey, to find nectar, to make babies. There's a lot of activity at that point. And our knit along is going to begin January 1st, 2022 and last through March 31st, 2022. So I think that's perfect because our shawl should be done right in time for springtime weather and all the bees to be coming out of their winter stasis. And I mean, I think it's perfect timing to have our shawls ready to wear at that point. So the yarn used in the sample of the shawl is by Woolen Twine. It calls for a DK weight yarn. The woolen twine is a very woolly yarn. It's BFL Masham, or Massam, however is the correct way to say that. You need approximately 656 yards of a DK weight yarn. But I will mention that many of the Ravelry notes that I have seen, people are saying that the shawl's a little bit small. So if you want a nice big shawl that you can wrap up in and be really cozy, you're probably going to want to make it a little bit bigger. Lyrica does include some instructions on how to do that by simply adding stitches to both sides of the shawl when you cast on. The shawl is knit with the largest number of stitches cast on and then decreases instead of increasing from, for instance, a garter tab cast on. So that means you need to know how big you want your shawl to be before you get started. That's different than many shawls. I think every shawl I have made is the opposite. You cast on a small number of stitches and you increase rapidly or gradually throughout the shawl until you make the shape that you want. And if you do it that way, then you can sort of decide at the end how big you want your shawl to be. But with this sort of shawl, it's predetermined by how many stitches you cast on in the beginning. So if you want it to be larger, which I do, I'm using the Woolen Twine yarn, and Lyrica mentions that you use about 2.5 skeins. So I would like to use all of my 3 skeins of yarn to make it a bit bigger, but I don't want to go over that since it would probably be difficult to acquire another skein of this for me. So I am going to add on 20 extra stitches to each side of the shawl, or I'm going to cast on an extra 40 stitches. This is a bought pattern, so I want to be careful not to give out too many details that are in the pattern. So I won't tell you the exact number of stitches to cast on, but I will say that I am casting on an extra 40 stitches for mine. Also, this shawl is designed to use a cable cast on with picots as a sweet and charming little design. Some people have decided that they prefer the look of a straight edge instead of the picots, like Becky. So she has decided to cast on with a long tail cast on and simply cast on the called for number of stitches, or however many if she's adding on to it, and that will create a nice straight edge. I do want to do the Picot cast on because I just think they're so adorable, but many people have had a bit of trouble with the directions for the Picot cast on, maybe not getting the right number of stitches, and I think it's because it doesn't clearly state in the directions. Once you've cast on the 2 Picot stitches, you need to knit those 2 stitches, then bind one off, and then place it back on the left hand needle. So I've recorded a little tutorial that I'm going to add to the end of this video showing how I cast on a cabled Picot cast on, which would work for any project using that method, but definitely will work for this one as well. So if you'd like to cast on along with me, you can watch that at the end for more information on how to do it. Another thing which I mentioned in the tutorial I find extremely helpful for any type of project that has a large number of stitches being cast on is to place stitch markers every 50 stitches, a removable stitch marker. This way I know if I have, for instance, a confirmed 50 stitches behind the stitch marker, I no longer have to count those. And if you're like me, I often recount, second guess my counting, get different numbers multiple times. So this way your time can be spent casting on and knitting instead of recounting stitches. I wanted to talk a little bit about the yarn used in this shawl. I will be using the woolen twine, which is the yarn that is the sample shawl is knit with, and it is a very beautiful caramel color DK weight, and you can get that from Woolen Twine's website, which I'll link below. I went ahead and cast on my stitches with my little Picots, and I think they're gonna be adorable. If you want to make them a little bit more pronounced, after you soak your finished shawl and you're blocking it, you can place some T-pins into the Picots and pull them down away from the shawl to get a more defined look on the Picots. But I have cast on and I'm ready to start on January 1st. I'm gonna be holding my project in this bag that I got from Hobby Lobby, and I love it because it has a sweet little bee on it. And I haven't really had time to make my own project bag, so I thought this was gonna be a great option, and I can reuse it as well. I've been so excited to see quite a few of you have made your own project bags or dyed your own yarn for the knit along. If you'd like some inspiration, I would encourage y'all to get on Instagram and search for the hashtag BeesAreFriendsKnitAlong, and you can see lots of different projects and ideas that everybody joining in are already starting to post about. All right, y'all, I rounded up 10 yarns that I thought would make great substitutions for the woolen twine yarn if you would like to choose to use something else. There are a few yarns that are very similar to the woolen twine. They're very woolly, non-superwash, and possibly a bit itchy for those who are sensitive. And then I also put some yarns in the group that are very soft, a really good choice for people who have sensitive skin. And then there's some really great budget-friendly yarns in here as well, so a nice mix to choose from. First on the list is Peace Fleece DK. This is the yarn Becky has chosen to use for her project, and she has already wound her yarn up. It is absolutely beautiful. It feels like a nice woolly yarn, very snuggly, warm, lofty. I will say that it has mohair in the yarn, so if you have mohair allergies, you'll probably have to pick something else. Number 2 on the list is Autumn and Indigo Home DK. This yarn is heavenly, and this is the color Gold Coast. If you notice, it's almost an exact match for the woolen twine caramel color that is used in the sample. But I will say, I think this is a bit softer, so this is a great option. Next on the list is Tuku Wool DK. Now this is their fingering, but the DK feels the same and has the same heathered look. There's lots of beautiful colors to choose from. It's 100% finished wool, and it has a nice woolly, sheepy smell to it. So this is a great option if you like that rustic feel. Next on the list is Biche a Bouche lamb's wool. Now this is Le Petit lamb's wool, but the Le lamb's wool is a light worsted, somewhere between a DK and worsted weight, so I think it will work well. It has the same woolly feel to it, but I think a rather soft hand. If you do have a wool sensitivity, this could be a bit itchy around your neck, but I think with blocking, it blooms and softens nicely. Next up is the Fiber Company Laurie. This is, I think, an amazing yarn. It is 100% Kent lamb's wool, sourced and produced in England. Plus, let me tell you about the yardage in this. 273 yards for a skein. So talk about some bang for your buck with a nice woolly yarn. It's got a very pretty heathered look, and there's a lot of colors to choose from. So I'll make sure and link this below. Next up is the Farmer Daughters Fibers Pishkin. I'm not sure how to say it, but I am sure that it is a great yarn. It's springy, it's woolly, but it has a soft hand to it. This is something that I think would be another great option if you're looking for a woolly yarn that's not super itchy. Okay, let's talk about some wool yarns that are soft if you have sensitive skin. Next up is Malabrigo Arroyo. This is 100% superwash yarn, and even if you do have a wool sensitivity, this is one that many people are able to tolerate, possibly because of the superwash, but it is an unbelievably soft yarn. So that's a great option to choose from as well. Now, a nice budget-friendly yarn that is beautiful and has a really nice halo is Barocco Vintage DK. This is $9 a skein, and there's some lovely heathered looks to the different colors. It does have some acrylic mixed in, but it makes it a wonderful yarn to use if you're gift knitting or knitting for yourself. I really love Barocco Vintage DK. I think it's a great yarn to have in your stash whether you use it for this project or not. Next up is Plymouth Superwash DK. This is $7.99 a skein, and I think that's a great buy. It's a superwash fine merino wool, so another great option if you're gifting. It is still going to be wool, but you can have a little bit more freedom to wash it, possibly even in the washing machine with the superwash treatment. And last but not least is the Penelope yarn by Durarum Natura, and I'm not sure if I said that correctly. It is 90% merino and 10% silk. I think that is a little bit of a luxury to have that silk in there, plus the merino, it's gonna be super soft. There's quite a few different colors to choose from. Talk about next to skin soft. So I think that would be an awesome choice if you want something that's just got that silky feel to it while you wrap up. Another thing to keep in mind while you're choosing your yarn, while it's not necessarily a deal breaker, I love to choose yarn based on whether or not I can spit splice it. Yes, spit splice it. If you're not sure what that is, it's where you're joining two yarns. It cannot be a superwash yarn. It has to be a animal fiber yarn that has not been treated. So you can watch videos about how to do this on YouTube, but it's really simple. You take your two ends of yarn. Sometimes you might separate if there's multiple plies to it. You might snip a couple off so that there's only one ply. Do the same on the other piece as well. Then you're gonna do exactly like the name implies. Get some spit on it. You'll get some spit from your mouth on the two ends. They say you can also use water, but I'm here to tell you it doesn't work as well. And you will then take those ends, put them together where they're overlapping by about an inch, and you're going to do this to add some friction and felt them together. You now have one continuous piece of yarn, and that way there's one less end you have to weave in. I like to use it for shawls because you're not having to start and stop like with a sweater in different locations. Mainly for a shawl, it's gonna be continuously knit. So at that point, you're only gonna have two ends to weave in, one from your cast on and one from your tail yarn. It's worth it. So I would encourage you to watch the videos in the pattern on how to make the bees. Lerica recorded a great tutorial on how she does it, and I think that before you get started, it's gonna really make things go smoother if you watch the video. She really did an awesome job on explaining how to make those bees look really nice. I'd like to mention that Becky had a great idea. She's going to listen to the audiobook of The Beekeeper's Apprentice. This is by Laurie R. King, and she'll be doing this during the Bees Are Friends knit along. So I was able to get this book off of thriftbooks.com, and I also have the audiobook on loan from the online library. And that way I can read some and listen some back and forth. I kind of like to mix it up. But this is a book about Sherlock Holmes and the girl who becomes his apprentice. It's got some really rave reviews. So we're excited to just add another bee-themed project in there with the knit along. Speaking of bee-themed projects, if you've really got your bee momentum going, I wanted to mention that Sarah from Craft Me Not Yarn Company has also got a knit along starting in January, and she's going to knit Andrea Mowry's Wool and Honey sweater pattern. So if you want to join along, she's also going to be knitting the shawl, and quite a few of us are going to try to knit the sweater as well. So there's two different bee themed knit alongs that I think it's going to be a lot of fun to join in with the knitting community on. And last but not least, prizes for the knit along, I wanted to show you guys one more time what all was going to be included. First of all, Becky and I both made project bags. So two different winners will each win a project bag. This is the Japanese knot bag that Becky made out of some really pretty Japanese material, and it's just an awesome little project bag. I love it. She made me one as well. That winner will also receive a sock set of yarn. Then I also made a project bag and another sock set of yarn for the next winner. Elijah from Horse Feather Fiber Arts has also made a bee themed progress keeper set. Isn't that stunning? Thank you, Elijah. And it is going to be given to a winner along with a zippered pouch made by Juanita from Woolly Bean. I'm sure most of you follow her and know how beautiful and well made her bags are. Last but not least, Jessica McDonald is generously gifting one of her new books to a winner as well. Woodland Ramble, a cozy collection of hand knits for children by Jessica McDonald. This book has beautiful patterns, cardigans, cabled sweaters, mittens, colorwork sweaters, colorwork hats, basically everything that you would possibly need to knit your child an entire wardrobe. This is going to be an awesome prize for one of you winners. Becky and I are so excited that y'all want to join along and knit this shawl with us. Thank you so much for your participation in this fun little knit along. It's not meant to have a lot of pressure. We've got 3 full months to knit the shawl. If you don't finish, no big deal. I often do not finish in knit alongs. Sometimes I don't finish on test knits, so it happens. If you do want to be eligible to win one of the prizes, you do need to post a picture with the hashtag BeesAreFriendsKnitAlong with a finished object so that we can see it. Keep in mind, if you have a private account, we won't be able to see it even if you add the hashtag. So you may need to send a message to let us know about your project and a picture of it that way. I would encourage all you guys to look at all of the different projects everyone else is working on, and you might find some really nice accounts you'd like to follow that way for more inspiration. I hope the last days of 2021 are treating you well. I am excited for January and 2022 to start. New year, new knitting, onward and upward. We hope this will be a fun knit along and you can enjoy the sense of community and knitting together on a fun project. Well, I can't wait to see all of y'all's projects. Don't forget to use the hashtag BeesAreFriendsKnitAlong, and happy knitting, y'all. Hello, y'all, and welcome to Youngfolk Knits. My name is Casey, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a cabled Picot cast on. You may use this for any pattern that calls for a cabled Picot cast on, but if you're joining us for the Bees Are Friends knit along and you're knitting the Humlebi shawl, which is designed by Laurie from Fiber Tales, this pattern you will use a cabled Picot cast on. And this is a paid for pattern, so I don't want to give too much away specifically about, you know, the number of stitches to cast on or anything like that. I will be showing you how to do the technique that it calls for, which is a common cabled Picot cast on. So let's get started. To begin, we're going to need a slip knot. So simply pull up a loop for your slip knot and place it on one of your needles. This needle is going to be your left hand needle, okay? Now, unlike a long tail cast on, we are done with our tail yarn. We won't be using it anymore, okay? Now, this slip stitch is going to count as our first stitch that we've cast on. Now, to do the cable cast on, you're going to insert your right hand needle as if to knit, okay? Now, we're going to wrap our yarn and draw up a loop as though we're knitting. But we've left this stitch on our left hand needle and we have a loop we've pulled up on our right hand needle. Let's pull that loop long to make it easier to place on our left hand needle. And instead of putting it on this way, we're going to give it a little bit of a twist and put it on like so, okay? Now you can just then tighten up your yarn, and you have now cast on 2 stitches. But I'm going to show you a way to make this go a little bit faster, okay? Insert your needle again in the last stitch here that we've just cast on, as though to knit. We're working with our working yarn, not our tail yarn. We're going to wrap that stitch as though to knit, pull up the loop again, pull it long. With a twist, place it on our left hand needle, but leave your right hand needle in the stitch, all right? Now we can tighten that up with our needle still inserted. And now you're ready to cast on another stitch. You're already in position. So we simply pull up a loop as though to knit, with a twist, place it on our needle and leave the right hand needle still inserted. So let's do that again. Wrap, pull up a loop, with a twist, place it on your left hand needle, leave the right hand needle inserted. Okay? So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's cast on a few more, and we'll see how we can get going with it. All right, leave that needle inserted. Wrap, pull up a loop, with a twist, place it on your left hand needle, leave that needle inserted. So you can really kind of get rocking and rolling if you continue to work it while leaving your needle inserted, okay? And it gives this pretty decorative edge to the cast on. It's a very structured edge though, with not a lot of give. So not a cast on you would want to use for anything that needs some stretch. All right, that is how you do a cable cast on. Let's rip back to our slip knot, and let's talk picots. Okay, so let's say that we have just placed our slip knot on our needle. We'll get the working yarn out of the way. We'll get the tail yarn out of the way and grab our working yarn. And let's cable cast on 2 stitches. So we have 1. So let's cable cast on 1 more by pulling up a loop, giving it a twist, placing it on the left hand needle and tightening it up. Leave your needle in. Let's pull up another one. All right, tighten it up. We now have 3 stitches that we have cable cast on. Let's work a picot. To do that, let's cable cast on 2 stitches. This is for the picot. So we'll cast on 1 and we'll cast on 2. All right, with our needle still inserted, we're now going to knit those 2 stitches we cast on for the picot. So we'll knit them normally, and our needle was already in position because we had left it inserted. And we now have those 2 stitches on our right hand needle. These are our picot stitches. We'll bind off one of the stitches and we are left with 1 stitch on our right hand needle. With a twist, we will place that stitch on our left hand needle and tighten it up. And we now have 3 cable cast on stitches and a picot stitch. All right? So let's now work by adding another group of 10. So we've got these 4 stitches here, okay? Let's work by adding a group of 10 stitches. So we'll cable cast on 9 stitches to start with. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whoops, 7, 8, and 9. So since our last picot, we have cable cast, this is our picot. It always tries to get in this group here because we've cast on from it. But we have cast on 9 stitches. we are now going to add a picot. All right, so let's cable cast on 2 more. 1 and 2. Okay, now let's work those 2 picot stitches by knitting them. So we'll knit 1 and we'll knit 2. Now we'll bind off 1. We have 1 stitch left, and we'll, with a twist, we'll place it on our left-hand needle. Now we have a group of 10 stitches because we cable cast on 9, then we did 2 for the picot, but we knit them, and then we bound off 1, and then we moved it back to the left-hand needle. So here's a group of 10 stitches. Something that I find very useful when casting on is I would probably put a stitch marker here because this is not a full group, just to let me know where I'm starting from. And then since I'm working in groups of 10, after every 50 stitches, I would add a stitch marker. If you're anything like me, I second guess, I have to count over, I have to start over, I get a different number every time. So when I have a confirmed 50 stitches, I would place a stitch marker here because, as I said, these aren't going to count with our groups. But then after every, I'm just placing this here for demonstration purposes, I would actually place a stitch marker after I had 50, and then I would continue with my cast on. That way my time is not spent recounting, instead my time is spent casting on and knitting. So what I'll do is, this can be a little bit fiddly to continue to cast on because you don't want to knit into your stitch marker, but insert your needle, wrap your yarn, pull up a loop, and here we go. We've got 1. All right, let's keep casting on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we've cast on 9 stitches. All right, let's do a picot. The key here is leaving that needle inserted all the time because we're always basically in the knit position. So let's do 2 cable cast on for the picots. There's 1 and there's 2. So we have cast on 11 stitches. Let's knit our 2 picot stitches, bind 1 off. Sorry, this is a little fiddly because I have my arms stretched out quite a bit, trying to keep it in frame for the camera. All right, let's place that picot back on the needle over here, and we have another set of stitches. So it's really fairly simple, and you get this really pretty decorative edge with these sweet, charming little picots. And you could also just do a long tail cast on for this shawl if you're not interested in doing the picots, but I think they add a little bit of extra to it. And when you're done with your shawl or any project you're using with picots, if you want to make them a little bit more visible after soaking your project, when you're pinning it down to block, you can pin those picots out a little bit, and that way they'll be more visible when it's done blocking. All right, I hope this helped, and happy knitting.